Hello, and welcome to Digital Artcast, hosted by Neill. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Procreate, the most advanced painting app ever designed for a mobile device. We'll be discussing the app a little more later in the episode, as well as giving away a free copy. But for now, let's get started.
Guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. Today I am joined with another jade artist of Hearthstone and Bioware fame, Mr. Mike Sass. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. So you and I had a weird instance of meeting where I had started a 30-day challenge on doing a kind of Hearthstone card study every day, and I think as I was kind of progressing and adding work to the portfolio, I came across some of your paintings. I think I reached out with a friend request, we added each other, and then I think randomly you commented on one of the Phoenix paintings studies that I'd done on one of your cards. I think it was like the level 1, 2, and 3.
Right. No, I mean, I think you get friend requests, and then you see people in your Facebook feed, and I noticed you doing all these Hearthstone recreations, and I'm not somebody who is a snob online. If I see something good, I'll say I like it, and I see you doing all this work, and it's like, wow, this guy's really got some work ethic. So you doing some of my paintings over, and I just commented how one of them I really didn't like, and give you some input in that sense of, I don't know why you're copying something. Maybe you think it's good, but I hated it.
It was just, I think it was because that challenge came just off the heels of Inktober. And I think it's a similar thing where, like, I've listened to Jake Parker talk about why he started it, and he was basically saying that the task wasn't really to make anything fancy, it was more just to make sure that people were doing something every day, like they were drawing every single day. And that kind of challenge that I'd done with the Hearthstone cards was, it was twofold. One was to make sure that I was painting for 3 to 4 hours a day, and I was, try to keep up my skills. And the other was obviously try to focus on a material that I loved, because I would love to work for Blizzard one day. So that was it was kind of double barreled, but it has actually gained quite a lot of attention from people. Like, I know, my general people who were in my friends feed, who are mostly working artists for companies, were saying, I loved it, it's great seeing it every day. But it did catch the attention of some Blizzard guys, and they were commenting on it. So I think the next task for me is to do the same thing again, but I'm going to try and create my own cards, or my own versions of cards. There's a couple of guys I spoke to, like Jeremy and that, they were saying that it was great that I was doing the studies, but they would love to see more original work. So yeah, that's good as well, because the task I was doing, I think, prepared me for doing more original pieces. Yeah.
I mean, copying someone's work is really a mechanical process. You're not really drawing. You're not problem solving. You're not doing any of the hard things. It's really sort of just some manual labor. So that stuff, that sort of type of practice needs to be. I wouldn't recommend that type of practice with the sort of volume. I mean, anything is better than nothing. But I was just laughing personally because it's probably the least favorite Hearthstone card I've done, and then copying it is just kind of like, oh my god.
Yeah. So obviously you've done some freelance stuff for Hearthstone, which I obviously picked up on, and that's why I kind of got in contact with you. But your kind of story starts way back, obviously through school and stuff. But then you obviously were or kind of found your initial career in Bioware. So probably take us back, like, to the start. Maybe even, obviously not like maybe high school, or, you've been drawn since 4, but maybe even like, college level, what you were studying, or how you maybe got into Bioware. Did you go to school for art initially?
Yeah, sure. No, I think I actually could talk about high school. I did go to a high school that had a really good art program with a serious teacher. And, it was one of the larger high schools where I live. So, there was enough critical mass of serious sort of art students that were teenagers. And we also had something called art special projects, meaning like I could take extra credit in art and have an extra class just focused on doing my own projects. So I had multiple art classes and a very good high school art teacher, and allowed me to really get into serious oil painting in my teen years. So then I went to the Alberta College of Art and Design in Canada here.
Oh, nice.
In about 1991. And so this was all pre-computer time. And, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but being like a serious artist and someone who wanted to get the best education possible, I went into the visual communications department, which is where you learn illustration and graphic design. It's sort of a dual stream, like you do both. But you know what? I could easily have been a painter, and oil painting is sort of the thing that I was most interested in. But I thought going to the commercial art side of the school would be the best way to get fundamental education and in some good nuts and bolts training. Knowing that the fine art teachings are very much more loosey-goosey and non-structured. So I think I made the right call in that sense, but I didn't hit college at a good time as relates to sort of the art industry now. It was sort of a transition time when the computer was a brand new thing. Yeah. So the first few years of visual communications in college, we did literally photocopier, letraset, letters, hand lettering with pen and ink, using things called PMT cameras and paste up stuff with cutting, Rubylith, and so everything sort of pre-computer graphic design, using markers, trying to make graphic design. Well, the teachers that were teaching were, from the 60s and 70s era. Right. Or 70s and 80s, and we were in the 90s. So, our instruction that we received was 70s, 80s sort of industry standards and practices. So it was basically at the end of its life cycle of that stuff being relevant. Right. So we kind of wasted a lot of time on stuff that was immediately rendered useless when the computer became the go-to tool for graphic design. Yeah. So the very end of third year college, we started to touch the computer and then used it in the fourth year. And it was such a new thing that literally the instructors were learning it on the Thursday night at a class, and then students on the Friday morning so nobody was an expert. Photoshop version 2 maybe we were using. I think the first version that had layers was maybe 2 or 2.5. Right. And it was just a messy time because nobody knew anything. So everything was pure experimentation with the computer. And literally, people would take a photo, scan it in, and put a lens flare filter on it and get an A for their assignment.
Did it me?
So whoever had a plugin in Photoshop that nobody else had would get the high marks because nobody knew what was going on.
Oh shit!
This was a joke, right? And this was this was still floppy disk era and utilizing old style types of drives to try to save your work. Things called zip drives and SciQuest.
I can remember them. Yep. And it's easy, I think, because I'm not as young as I probably look, but I'm 32 now. But even when I was in high school at the time, I think we were still using 3.25-inch discs, some of the old BBC microcomputers. So yeah, the older style stuff is not alien to me. I do know of it, but I think it's almost a good thing, because we've had talks about how computers are pretty much able to do anything for you now, and you saying that you didn't touch a computer to third year is almost like a blessing, because I think people negate too many of the foundations. You know, we talked to Scott about this, about how his foundation and marker and pen was what set the standard for his work, and the computer was just another tool. But I think people rely too much on that now. Do you feel that way?
I think to a degree. I think the problem with me is that, like, Scott's older than I am, so he had, you know, a number of years of really honing hand skills based art, and I didn't really have that. So I had some of that, and then immediately, you know, switching to the computer, and just a whole bunch of stuff all thrown at me at once.
Yeah.
You know, like, we would do what's called media exploration class. So you would use the airbrush for maybe 2 weeks, and then you'd be done with it, and then you'd use marker for 2 weeks, and you'd be done with it. Right. So there's no really expertise built. Yeah. And I think from Scott's standpoint, you know, he's probably coming from an earlier era, slightly 5 to 10 years, where he would have had a bit more of that hand skills expertise. So it was just, I hit college in the early part of my career at just a real changeover time. Yeah. So I can basically say I'm self-taught, even though I went to college for 4 years. Yeah. It was all kind of a bunch of wasted time assignments that were sort of rendered irrelevant immediately when the computer came about. Yeah. And then, so I graduated then with sort of a portfolio of like one of everything. You know, like I tried every little thing, but wasn't an expert or had a great portfolio of anything. So I had like a scratchboard drawing, and I had, you know, 2 oil paintings, and I had a couple things on the computer. So, you know, just a portfolio in the mid-90s that represented kind of that switchover from 2 different modes of doing art. So I guess the weakness is obvious, that there was no expertise built in any one area. But the strength would be that I guess I had that sort of innate flexibility going into my video gaming career, where I had touched a whole bunch of different types of processes of making art. So basically that's how I got my job at Bioware. So Bioware didn't exist in 1994 as it does now. So I got a job out of college. I was basically color correcting photos of bed and breakfasts for a book publisher. Wow. So basically you would get any art job you could in like the town you lived in. Like, this is pre-internet, you know, I had no visualization of like a world-class art career with multinational companies. You know, I just had a localized education, and as such, you just try to get what little scraps of art-related work you can locally. So I got this job at this little book publisher, and then I had a friend who had to go back and redo his 4th year, but during the summer he had started working for some guys in Calgary, Alberta, that were working on a video game called Shattered Steel. Right. And since he had to go back to school, he recommended I should apply to these guys to be the artist for the company. So I sent them my portfolio, and this was at a time in the industry where like the quality standards were super low, the technology was super rudimentary, and you basically just sort of learned on the job. So obviously, they liked my portfolio because it had some computer art in it, whereas this is a time when the computer was brand new. So unless you were like a programmer, there wasn't a whole lot of artists that had much in the way of computer art in their portfolio.
Right.
So I got a job at this company called Pyrotech, which was basically Bioware in its early days. So we were developing Shattered Steel. And just to give a bit of framework to that, it was all on the PC using DOS.
Wow.
And as an artist, I couldn't deal with this stuff. Text on a screen and all these command lines that you have to type in to bring up directory listings and stuff.
Yeah.
So I recommended I get a Mac because that's what I had used in college. And so the publisher Interplay sent us a Mac, and I probably had a, Photoshop 2 or whatever at that time.
Yeah.
And then so I was the de facto singular artist working on this project, Shattered Steel.
Mm-hmm.
And there was two parts to this company. The other part was up in Edmonton, which is where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And they had started working on a demo called Battleground Infinity, which then became Baldur's Gate 1.
Right.
So Battleground Infinity was a top-down sprite D&D demo. And the publisher Interplay that we were working with on Shattered Steel had the license to make D&D video games. So they slapped that on Battleground Infinity, and it was turned into a D&D game. Mm-hmm. So that's how I got in. I got in from college, got a job at the local video game startup. We're talking like 6 guys in like one office.
Yeah.
And then I moved up to Edmonton to finish Shattered Steel. And then it just sort of blew up from there. Baldur's Gate 1 became a hit. And then we made Baldur's Gate 2. And then Neverwinter Nights, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Jade Empire.
Yeah.
Just sort of grew and grew and grew. But I was like BioWare's very first artist. So, I grew as a video game artist at the same sort of speed and pace that the company grew. So,
right.
From a bunch of guys with very rudimentary technology, as the projects became bigger and the stakes became bigger, I was there, the most senior guy because I was the first guy. So I had the opportunity to sort of, do the art that was high profile simply because the projects grew to be high profile.
Yeah.
Never have gotten the sort of job I got today with my portfolio from the mid 90s. Just got in because everything was startup level, rudimentary, and I was just a generalist. So everything I know now, I know from doing it as part of my job. I didn't learn it in school. I didn't have the skills or abilities.
Yes.
Going into the industry.
Well, I mean that's interesting as well. I think because as me, I've kind of had a long journey where I left my job as an engineer to go back and study art because I wanted to do that. I wasn't happy in my job, but just on my last year, when it was my third year, just there now, last February, studying 3D art, I got a chance to go work at Access Studios in Glasgow, and they freelance work or take on work for other companies like Riot Games for League of Legends, and the guys who done Destiny, they worked on Destiny 2 while I was there. And I did feel like, because people were saying, you could go and work in Access after university, and I thought, that's just too high a caliber for me at the moment. I feel like I would just struggle too much. I mean, there's totally people there who have left from the degree program and went to work at Access, but it's a very tall order because they're very high caliber studio. They work on such big projects. But then just in November, I got offered a job in a small startup company that are working on a game just now, a 2D art game, kind of RPG, but the level for me of what I'm being expected to do is very, it's capable of what I can accomplish at the moment. So I think there's a kind of similarity in your story. Like, I think it is good that you try and maybe judge or kind of scale how well you think you can do in a company and tailor your portfolio to that. So yeah, I followed the same path, starting in a smaller company, and then hopefully as it builds, my ability will build with it, as the projects get bigger. So yeah.
That's exactly what happened to me. Like, Basically, my sort of digital art career started in Baldur's Gate 1. Like I did all the art for Shattered Steel 2D wise, so I did all the textures and all the sort of marketing renderings and things like that. And then in Baldur's Gate 1, we had the need for like portraits for the characters in the game, and a bunch of different artists like tried to paint them, and they all were not looking so good. So I tried to do it, and mine looked good. So that's kind of how it started. Is that these portraits? There was a need for a bunch of 2D painting in the game, and I seemed to be the guy who could do it the best in the company. And then it sort of blew up from there. The portraits became a big deal in the whole RPG industry. Probably from my Baldur's Gate 1 portraits sort of starting that trend of like sort of crafted character art. Because before that, a lot of it was utilizing like photos and really rudimentary sort of drawings and stuff. Like 2D art in video games in sort of the early 90s was really, really non-specialized. And it was probably a lot of it was just whatever the programmers could do themselves, or sometimes plugging in like stuff advertising agencies would supply. But developers that had the ability to do illustration on site as part of the company was a brand new thing. And I was one of the first guys that was able to do that. And such that when we were on to Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, me as sort of I became the marketing artist at Bioware. So the guy who would do sort of the finished illustrations. So it became, we were like, us and Blizzard were probably the two only companies in the industry that had sort of illustration capabilities in-house, whereas most of it would have been done by the publisher through ad agencies and specialized freelancers. It wasn't normal that employees of game companies had the skills to put the sort of polish and finishing touches on things. So then when I was working on Knights of the Old Republic, I actually got to do the box art like in my cubicle at the company. Like whereas, a multi-million-dollar Star Wars game would normally be, and today would be, heavily corporate controlled, gone through a lot of checks and balances and, and focus group testing and all that. Back in the early 2000s, I was able to do the Star Wars box cover just by myself without anybody really having any say. So, I had these unbelievable opportunities just based on how I hit the industry in my position at Bioware. And the fact that there was not really greater expertise at that time because things hadn't really broken down into specializations.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely interesting. I mean, I think I talked to you about this before, but one of the first guys we actually had on just after he'd done the ILM challenge on ArtStation was Matt Rhodes. Did you work with Matt at all at the time in Bioware? Were you aware of his work at the time? Did you kind of cross paths? Or?
Not really. Like I was in the marketing department,
right,
and he was on like development teams, so it's different floors and different areas.
Yeah.
But I was kind of a different generation of employee.
Right.
So I was pre-specialization. Like I had to learn like utilities when we were on Shattered Steel that were homemade 3D programs. Then I had to learn Lightwave and then 3D Studio Max.
Oh, God.
And I learned all this stuff myself, just through the tutorials and the instruction manuals and stuff like that.
Wow.
And I was actually responsible for a lot of the like scene setup and lighting and texturing for the early like movie sequences at Bioware.
Wow.
So there was no specialization. As far as like illustration goes, I sort of knew relatively early that's where my interests were. And I saw sort of the writing on the wall that you were going to have to specialize. Like there was really good 3D modelers really good animators. And as the technology became more complicated successively, they could just hire somebody out of school that was better than you at doing anything, because we were generalists. And a lot of the generalist artists that started Bioware left relatively early in the company's growth because of that, because they were quickly sort of outshone by people that were specialists in one area. So my specialization became the illustration, and so I was working on all the magazine covers and all the box arts and all the desktop wallpapers and things like that. But then later on, say with Mass Effect 1, like the game engine technology was so detailed and sophisticated, and the like lighting and rendering and resolution was so high that those assets started to be used for the marketing materials, and illustration was not really needed anymore. So that's the time when my sort of career had started to ramp down at Bioware, and I saw the writing on the wall that I was going to have to become a technician again rather than an illustrator. I was going to have to, start to specialize in this game engine technology. And literally on Mass Effect 1, there was a period where I spent 3 months just posing models for fake screenshots in the game. So, they need screenshots to give to magazines and press, and the game run. So I have to take all these models in the Unreal Engine and like attach lens flares to the guns and roll around and make the characters look like they're talking and fighting.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, because it even recalls a story I heard when I made a friend a couple of years ago when I kind of decided I wanted to get in the games industry, and one of my friends knew some of the Rockstar Games in Edinburgh who make Grand Theft Auto, and he had been there since since the company was making Lemmings back in like the 80s, and he actually was a 2D guy to start with, done some graphic design, and the first 2 Grand Theft Autos I think were 2D, they were top down, but then as they started to evolve into 3D games, he was the same. He was getting told, you'll have to learn Max, you'll have to learn Lightroom or Lightwave, you'll have to learn how to texture and model things because we need to do it in 3D now. And it was the same, there was no specialization. He just had to learn how to do it. And then I think, he's been lucky. He's still there. So he's just worked on Grand Theft Auto 5, but he does a more 2D graphic design background now. He's kind of made a speciality for him, but as he was talking about how it was difficult where the people who were coming in who were younger were so much more talented. He was having to take a backseat because he couldn't keep up sometimes with it, the level they were putting out specialization. And yeah, so I mean, was that, as we're talking about, you moving on from Bioware, and where was your next steps after that? Did you have an idea that you wanted to leave, or did you see another opportunity with another company or something freelance kicked up, or?
No, I think like what you're saying is correct. Like, the new talent and the new hires. I mean, they're good people applying from all around the world that have specific video game educations, and none of that stuff existed 20 years ago. So, I saw immediately, sort of at the end of my Bioware career that my options were going to be, you either get another job at another video game company or you freelance, right? And the only thing that's really realistic to freelance on is like plug and play stuff like illustration, and that's where my expertise and interests lie anyway. So for a number of years at the tail end of my Bioware career, I really made sure I was getting a good portfolio out of the whole experience, that I was developing skills and getting a resume that I would be able to just go home and work from home and be able to move laterally into sort of similar positions because if I let the company dictate my career, I said, okay, well, what do you want me to do? Okay, I'll pose fake screenshots for the rest of my life. Suddenly, my career is going to be dictated by specializations and technologies that I have to get a job at a company to keep doing. So, like all the animators, all the 3D artists, level designers, when these guys leave Bioware or a company, their only real option is to go get the same job at a similar company.
Yeah.
And where I live in Edmonton, Canada, there's only one major video game developer in the city. So it means, I have to move to a different part of the country. And I just don't think that's smart to constantly be chasing jobs and all that.
Yeah.
And my interest really lie in actual like oil painting and illustration. So I thought being a freelancer, I'll have the ability to sort of be able to self-dictate my medium and how long I take on things and, the types of works I do. So the sort of self-control of being a freelancer definitely appealed to me. So I targeted leaving Bioware with a good portfolio. And when I did that, I went to a convention in the US and I met the art director at Blizzard. I met actually Ben Thompson, who's the art director for Hearthstone right now.
Right.
And Jeremy Cranford, who's the art outsourcing manager.
Yep.
And at the time, they were working on the World of Warcraft trading card game. So basically similar to Hearthstone, but like a printed version, like Magic the Gathering. And I brought my, Bioware portfolio, and they were basically like, awesome, like, can you do this? Like, how long does it take? And I said, well, this took me 2.5 days. And, just a couple conversations, and they had fairly good confidence that I could do what they needed. I had basically the same job as these guys in, a similar company. So it was really easy for me to start to do freelance work then. But I had to get out of Edmonton, Canada, and go meet all these people in person.
Yeah.
And it was a major thing. So I would say for a freelancer or somebody wanting to get into this area of the industry, and I think I heard Scott Robertson talk about this in your interview with him, is the personal contacts is a major aspect to it. Yeah. They have to see you in person, see your personality, see that you're serious, be comfortable with your communication, and all those things are equally important as your actual quality. So it was very easy for me to get freelance work once I met people in person. But there's probably a good 6 months to a year between me leaving Bioware and me getting similar work, simply because I didn't know anybody. I'd been at one company for 12 years and had no contacts to doing anything else. So, but it worked out. So I targeted being a freelancer. Now I'm a freelancer. I've been a freelancer for about 10 years.
Right.
And all my friends at Bioware who had more technical specialization in their video game career, they're not freelancers. They have to follow the job opportunities and hop around to different companies. And, video game companies are not a stable entity. They're constantly going in and out of business.
Yeah, totally. No, that's awesome. And I think just there, Mike, we'll take a quick break and we'll hear from our sponsor on the podcast, which is Procreate. And then we'll come back to your freelance career. Okay, guys.
Now at Digital Artcast, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor Procreate. Procreate is an Apple Design, award-winning digital painting and illustration solution designed exclusively for iOS. Procreate allows you to create professional-grade artworks wherever you are, with an advanced dual-texture brush engine, a robust layering system, and groundbreaking canvas resolution, all for only £9.99. You can find Procreate 4, the new release, through the App Store on your iPad, or learn more at www.procreate.art. Remember to leave a comment on YouTube or leave us a review on iTunes to be in with a chance of winning a copy of Procreate 4 for free. That's right, free. Thanks again to the Procreate team for sponsoring our podcast. Now, back to the episode.
Okay, guys, so we're back. Thanks again to Procreate for sponsoring the podcast. Mike, you've left Bioware at this point. You've taken on some freelance opportunities. So you working for Blizzard right out of the gate, after you getting your freelance opportunity, was that the kind of the first proper work you had after leaving Bioware?
I think the first work I had was maybe through Paizo, and they make Pathfinder.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But this World of Warcraft trading card art was very early too. So I mean, because I met them in person, that just happened after I went to this particular convention. But I got the Pathfinder work just by emailing them at that time. So yeah, I think I entered the freelance industry kind of like, blind. Like I didn't have any contacts. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know where the opportunities lied.
Yeah.
And that just sort of built by going to some conventions and stuff. And, I think because I got on with some good, stable companies, I haven't really expanded that much. Like, I've probably worked with 10 or less companies in my entire 10-year freelance career. Like,
right.
So much of the work, like for Hearthstone, is just continuous. Like there's a real big drop off from the top companies downwards. So there's not really any reason for me to look for different work if I've got sort of stable, consistent monthly work with some of these people.
Right. Okay. And then has that been just kind of your mantra since you've kind of left? Have you stuck to more fantasy-based work? Is that kind of where your niche is? I mean, because you've done a lot of kind of more sci-fi stuff at Bioware, so did you try to kind of flip the script a bit and do more fantasy stuff moving forward into freelance, or have you done a mixture of both? Or
no, I think I'm a little different because I actually want to be like an oil painter as well, right?
Right.
And if you look at the types of subject matter that is applicable to that, obviously sci-fi is not as good. For oil painting, you want character-based narrative art, things that have more sort of storytelling and face, faces and all that. So I don't think I'm not really into sci-fi as much as just whatever is as close as possible to illustration that also doubles as making good original art paintings from. Hearthstone isn't the best for that because the work is so vibrant and so cartoony. But Magic is really good for that, and I've done some Magic. And I've done other things. I've done some stuff for Fantasy Flight for their Star Wars games.
Right.
So just whatever opportunity is out there for good illustrations that pay well and that allow me to do originals when I have the time.
Yes. Oh no, keep going.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that. Have you found that you spent so long in a studio-based job and you were kind of doing the 9 to 5 thing? Do you emulate that in your freelance work? Are you kind of up at your desk at 9 o'clock and then you work till 5, or have you found that freelance has afforded more opportunity for freedom, and how do you kind of balance that with work, family life? Like, are you finding that freelance suits you more now? You wouldn't want to go back to a studio job, or?
From a work standpoint, it's pretty much the same. Like I work basically 10 to 6, and that's about what I would work at Bioware too. Like I think I went in at 10 and left at 6 at Bioware just to avoid traffic. So it's the same. I think I'm just a pretty disciplined, structured sort of person. I'm not the kind of person who will be up late working at 2 a.m. and stuff. It just doesn't make sense. A big part of it too is just as I get older, like I'm 45 now, like balance is becoming a huge deal. So like I really try to exercise frequently now, and I have 3 kids now, so all these things really sort of take your options away for this sort of mythical freelance work flexibility thing that just doesn't exist. Like if kids have to go to school and I have to work out and I have to put in 8 hours of work a day, the best way to organize that is working like a normal work day.
Yeah.
Saying I'm going to work till 2 in the morning just doesn't work. I got to play with my kids and give my wife some time off in the evenings.
Yeah.
All these things just manifest themselves that a normal work day is still the best option. And even before I had kids and all that, I still worked, 10 to 6, basically. But I will work some weekends if I have to. And like today is Sunday, I'm talking to you. I'll probably do some sketching after this.
Right.
That's pretty normal for freelancers. Freelancers working 6 days a week is a pretty standard thing, I think.
Oh, interesting. Well, I mean, I was just going to say, because some of the guys I've met recently, even one of the guys I know he does actually do some stuff for Blizzard, and he has a whole rule of like the weekends are his his golden time where he doesn't answer emails, he doesn't do any work at all. Like he just plays with his kids, spends time with his wife. So he's kind of like a Monday to Friday kind of guy, and then the weekends are like I think because early in his career he did work like in the weekends, and he did work maybe even 7 days if it was needed. But then I think he just kind of was like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I just want to focus on my kids, and I want to be able to work as well. So I need to cut off the weekends just for me.
Yeah. The reality of the situation is that it all evens out. So if you work 6 or 7 days a week, you'll find yourself being just less productive during the 5 days that someone else might work more productively. So it all evens out. I think there's obviously a pressure and a volume that needs to be handled as a freelancer. Keeping up that sort of quality and everything. It's not a studio job where, like, studio jobs have built-in inefficiencies. They have meetings you have to attend where you're sitting and doing nothing. There's lots of stuff that's canceled and never sees the light of day. There's lots and lots of wasted time. As a freelancer, every single thing I do is like production. Like nothing is wasted. I don't know if I've hardly worked on anything that's ever been canceled. Everything is a direct line to like a chunk of income, and everything is simple labor equals income equation. Where in a studio job, you're paid to be there, you're paid for your opinion, you're paid to be an employee and be owned by the company. As a freelancer, it's just nuts and bolts. You send them a picture, they send you a check. So as a freelancer, definitely all your working time is like productive time. So that's what I'm saying is there's not these little bits of rest in the middle of the day where somebody's stopping by your cubicle and you're talking about TV shows for half an hour and you go for lunch, workmates and stuff. Like Bioware, there was so much of that. There was so much just squishy time. There was a gym in the building and a coffee shop across the street, and everybody just hangs out and talks in a million meetings. Like the amount of work that actually gets done compared to freelancer is probably in the order of like 2/3. So as a freelancer, if you're working more productively than an employee and you're also working more days, something's got to give. So you're gonna get tired and burnt out, or you'll just be less productive. So people that say they work 5 days and take the weekends off, I think are being realistic, because they know that you can't squeeze any more out of that your working schedule than that anyways.
I was going to say, I think there's definitely something we've talked about in talks I've had before, where you get this thing called the level of diminishing return, where you can draw for 12 hours a day, but after like maybe hour 6 or 7, like your brain kind of starts to shut off. Like it almost is like burnt out already. Like it can't really process much more problem solving. It's kind of like I need a rest. And I think that's a danger I've seen in the industry with younger students, even younger than me. I mean, we were looking at a guy's work the other day, I forget the guy's name, but I'll have to send it to you. But it was a guy, I think he's from Korea, and he's maybe 17 years old, and he's been studying 3D for a year, and his stuff is, industry beyond even. Like, it's just phenomenal work. But he had attested to, doing these 12-hour days. But I've got to say that when you're 17, 18 years old, you maybe can push your body that much, but when you're a student and you try to get in a studio job and you try to burn 16-hour days, like, yeah, there's a point where your body just refuses to cooperate, if you know what I mean. Like, it's just, yeah.
I think I do recommend, though, that you do have a part of your life when you're younger that you have this sort of crazy focus and growth and learning that, you're not going to have those opportunities later in life. So do that now for sure. I mean, burn yourself out, gain that experience. If you're 45 and have 3 kids, like, I don't learn that much anymore. Like, everything I do is just production. And if I'm learning something, it's just, making this job slightly better than the last job, or correcting something, or trying something slightly new. But, leaps and bounds in sorts of education, those things happen in your 20s and 30s. And my job at Bioware was perfect for that because, like I said, I was the only artist doing my job, and I had sort of the full reins to succeed or fail. Whatever I made was like accepted. There was no boss. There was no. I didn't have anybody to live up to at that time. I was like my own sort of department. But yeah, now for young people, you just need to find a way to be productive and have a crucible of growth. And I think, I hear the opposite. I hear people say, oh, it's all about balance. It's all about life experience and all that. That is sort of true, but don't use those sorts of things as an excuse for being lazy as well.
Today's a rest day. I'm taking a bit of me time, so I'm just not going to do any work, and then you do that for 5 days.
I've heard this from people that are not accomplished artists and that have not done much, and they say, oh, you have to have your rest and your me time and life experience and read books and blah blah blah, but they're not good artists. So it's, you do need a certain amount of focus time and specialization time and hours. There's a good phrase that I heard from an artist named Mark Zug, who I really admire, and he just calls it like ass in chair time. You just need ass in chair time. Like, it all comes down to just focus and having that ass in chair time. And as you get older, it's harder and harder to have that ass in chair time.
So especially because you've got kids. Like, kids are going to be your biggest thing just now.
I'm okay because I have a studio separate from the house.
Right.
But like, my back will get sore if I'm on the computer a lot, or I just don't have the ability to focus as much, or motivation. So a lot of it is just a certain amount of drive you have when you're younger. A certain amount of competitive drive should be harnessed. And those learning opportunities, like when I was at Bioware, so they had what's called like educational allowance. Like, every year you were there, they would pay for like, I don't know, like half or a third of like a course. And so after a couple years, then you could go, say, like travel for a course, and they would pay for it.
Oh, cool.
So I really utilized that like to its fullest degree there. So I took a whole bunch of like oil painting courses and stuff. And I did a lot of learning when I was there that was like building my skills that I use now. So I don't do a whole lot of learning now, but what I'm doing is I'm just utilizing all this sort of built up knowledge. Whereas if you don't do that, then you're constantly having to learn and produce at the same time in the framework of like diminishing ability to do so.
Especially when you try to take on work and they're maybe asking you to do a specific thing that you haven't learned, and you have to learn that to do the work. And I mean, even just now I'm finding there's a whole crossover where People are having to utilize, like 2D artists are having to utilize 3D now in their workflow, which a couple of years back, or even 4 or 5 years back, was just not a thing. But now I think concept artists, especially 2D guys, are expected to know programs like Max and Maya, or even Modo, or ZBrush, just something they can use to whip up basic compositions in light before they start painting. So I mean, have you ever tried to dive into 3D with your paintings, or are you quite happy with the traditional approach to the brushes and stuff you use? Or
well, that's kind of how it all started, is utilizing 3D. So like I said, I used to be one of the main sort of texture, lighter scene setup guys for the cinematics. So like I would model some characters and I would create the scenes in light and render them. And that was sort of a lot of my early Bioware work, was like painting on top of renders and creating models and rendering them and finishing them as illustrations. So yeah, I've done a lot of that, but again, that was probably when the programs were a little less complicated and the expectations a little simpler.
Right. Yeah.
Like the Knights of the Old Republic box is like that. It's like a mix of like utilizing low polygon game characters and then rendering them out and painting on top of them to round them off and stuff.
Right.
And I did that all the way through Mass Effect. Like even though the Unreal Engine looks really good, character spaces are still kind of blocky and their hands are still like sausages, and you still have to sort of paint on it all to make it look totally realistic to be judged as a still image. So a lot of my Bioware career was using renders like that, but other times it was pure illustration as well, starting from like a drawing. So listening to you talk about young artists today and the trends, it's just, it brings to mind like just career planning questions, like what are you going to choose to do, and what are the trends, and where's the competition? And I think I want to be more of a painter, more of an oil painter, and I've always wanted to be that. And I think in hindsight, the way the industry is going, it's a good spot to be, because the people that are quote unquote like fine art painters don't have like the fidelity and ability that we have as like concept art, video game, illustration guys. So we have the ability to create like pretty spectacular oil paintings. And no matter how good you are as a digital artist, it's still just a file. It's still a print at best, but it's never an original. So by being someone who's been always sort of half tech guy, half oil painter, I think I'm in a pretty good position. And so, for instance, like guys that do like magic paintings and Hearthstone paintings, like I see guys selling magic paintings for like $3-4 grand, like quite consistently. Where the assignment fee might be $1,000 and the painting will sell for $3,000. So you can do like 1/3 of the work and get 3 to 4 times the pay, right? So the trick is, as an oil painter, is you have the ability to totally separate your product from everybody else. Like it exists as an artifact, it exists as a collectible, it exists as like a rare one-off, and it's not a marketplace that's expanding at all. Like there's very few guys that do the oil paintings, and there's no new people entering that field. Like the guys that I knew doing this 20 years ago are the same guys doing it now. And I don't see new artists entering the field as oil painters. So I'm glad I targeted that, because it allows me to be separate and not have to sort of compete with the same criteria as the 17-year-old Korean guy who will spend like 15 hours a day, which I just can't keep up with.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely I think since entering the industry, I've definitely seen it as an industry where um, I think it's just one of the hardest industries in the world to be in. I mean, I think entertainment in general is like that. Whether you're an actress or a sound producer or an artist, um, if you're creating something for an entertainment value, um, you're always competing with somebody else because it's such a sought after job. Like I know, especially when I wanted to leave my job, I felt it would be such a not that it was easy, but it just seemed like a really cool job. You know, like the cool factor, like the rockstar lifestyle, like oh, you get to work in video games, you get to play them, you get to, be amongst other people who make like I don't know, like Gears of War and Skyrim and Halo, like all this cool shit. I get to do this, and if you spoke to somebody about your job and they're like, oh my god, you're working on something related to Star Wars, that must be so cool, like But for you, it was a lot of long hours in the office. I mean, like there's almost, I think you talk about, I think a lot of people get into it sometimes for the wrong reasons. That's what I'm saying. And I think yeah.
2 points. Anytime people will do work for free and you want to do it and get paid, you're screwed. Second, any type of work that can be like emailed, you're screwed. Because that means anyone, any place in the world can do it and be your competitor. Yeah. So if you want to make a lot of money, be a plumber, be somebody that whose work is like needed and nobody else wants to do it, and it can't be emailed, and nobody's going to do it for free, right?
Yeah.
So art is like you're saying, it's one of the toughest fields to be in because it's a passion field.
Yeah.
It's a field that has a lot of cachet and sort of subsidiary fame and connection to famous products. But it's just a matter of your priorities. Like, sometimes I think, like, I don't actually teach, but I think what are some of the best advices I would give to like students? I think a lot of it is financial. It's like, be, frugal, be cheap, be good with money. And then everything flows from there. Like your needs from an income standpoint, if they're low, that totally frees you up then to have more of a passion-based career.
Yeah.
So, all the sorts of advice you could ever have about how to get better as a 2D artist, a 3D artist, what are industry trends, that all has to be couched in the framework of what is your income needs. And that's the major thing, is sustainability in your career is what's going to allow you to like get better and grow and have like the long-term successes. So just having like low expenses, being good with money, and your art career will be so much more successful if you put those things into place.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, Mike. I think that's a great piece of advice for most people, and I definitely would say, having went through the system of leaving a job and coming back in this industry as a new face, definitely measure your expectations. I mean, unless you're going to be the phenomenal top 10% that get to go work in something like Irvine, California with Blizzard, where the money is good for good reason, because it's such a high profile company. But be prepared to gauge your expectations on a lifestyle. I think I've most of, in fact, near everybody I've met in this industry has never been driven by money. That's always been passion and the drive to create something that probably makes people go, wow, that's why they do it. It isn't for the paycheck. I mean, obviously everybody's got to live, everybody's got to have a house and pay their bills. You just can't get away from money. It is the root of all evil. But you're never going to be driving Lamborghinis or sinking in hot tubs over the weekend or popping champagne at the weekends. It's definitely.
Well, I think you need to have a really long-term view of the career, because I think I saw like a chart about a year ago that was like, it was like an income chart, like what percentage of illustrators make less than $5,000 a year, which percentage of illustrators make 10 grand or less, which percentage make 30 grand or less, and then broken down into like age groups as well. And like the vast majority of illustrators make like 10 grand or less per year.
Wow.
And the vast majority of illustrators are under 40. So you're in like the 1% if you're over 40 and making like 50 grand a year.
Yeah.
So knowing that 99 out of 100 people won't be an illustrator at 40 making 50 grand a year, you have to know that's a statistic now. That's a statistic that's probably not going to change.
Yeah.
So look at that as a reality. How do you be an illustrator at 40 years old and 50 and 60? And how do you survive making those levels of income?
Yeah.
I think most people are just trying to get their first job, trying to get the foothold, trying to get a bit of internet fame, trying to get a better picture. But, those things all need to be, I think, thought about within like a real larger world view of sustainability.
No, 100%. I couldn't agree more, Mike. Okay then, well, Mike, I think that's a good time to wrap it up.
Not too fun to think about those things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I hope we've not depressed anybody listening to the podcast. There is positives in this, and I mean, if you're hard enough working, you're not going to starve. Like you will make a decent living. Like you'll be able to afford like rent and food. You're not going to. I think
So here's the flip side of what I said.
Yeah.
Because so few 40-year-old artists are doing this, there's constant opportunity for 20-year-old artists to come in and take their place. So like the young artists putting in those hours, like you guys are like a huge threat to guys like me. Like we're just barely keeping our jobs. Seriously, like there's so much good art out there. There are so many good artists.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of industry that you sort of bank experience and can rest on your laurels.
Yeah.
So those opportunities, like there's lots and lots, and there's nothing standing in the way of anybody getting them other than just being able to do the work that the companies need you to do. So fully go ahead and pursue this career because there's tons of opportunity out there. And just look at the people that you admire and look at their work. And when your work is comparable, you're just a step away from getting that work. You just need to meet the companies in person and make that personal connection. So there's so much work and there's so many people out there. It's a scary industry from a certain vantage point, but from other vantage points, there's a ton of opportunity. So I hope people don't get discouraged by anything that's said.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it's one of these things where you're totally right in saying that it can be difficult, but rewarding. Like I know the hours can be long and the work might be a bit harder to maintain because you maybe have to learn things, but the reward overall, not just the money, but like for instance, the game I'm working on just now, I think only just recently with the latest demo, with the build we put together, my name was in the credits, and it was like a tear-jerking moment. Like after 5 years of leaving my job, and thinking that I wouldn't make anything of myself, here it was in the credit roll for this game, and that for me was better than any paycheck I could have ever got. Just the ability to see almost like my name in lights, like I had accomplished something. So yeah, I would say that's the rewarding factor. That's something that keeps me going forward, that makes me want to do more, because that to me is more important than money, is the recognition. I think is for me anyway. I don't know about you, Mike, if that's the same. Like seeing your name in the credits of the Star Wars games, was that a thing for you as well, or?
Well, no, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, look at us, two guys that hardly know each other, talking to each other, having in-depth conversation. Like just our ability to be in this industry, it's more than just, going to a job and making coffees for people at Starbucks. We're connecting with people, we're making friendships, we're developing certain legacies and whatnot. And, it's a great career for that. There's definitely great art communities out there.
Yeah.
And it's I would say that's probably the strongest and most positive thing of being an artist, is just the community aspect is unbelievable. Like the artists I've met are like the smartest, most hardworking people in society. Make it in this field requires really a level of dedication that weeds out, people that are more lackadaisical, and just having camaraderie with people that you respect is definitely special. Artists are not the type of people that just go through the motions.
No, definitely, 100%. I agree with you. Okay, cool. Right, well, just to say thanks very much, Mike, for coming on and speaking to us. It was an honour and a privilege to have a conversation with you, and I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. Thanks for having me. When I listen to podcasts, I like hearing other perspectives, and I always want to hear perspectives from older people that have a bit of wisdom from the back end of their career. And so I hope at this stage in my career, I'd like to provide that to other people, just so they have sort of a longer term vision of certain things to expect, and not just looking at the small short term goals that they have, but to be aware of pitfalls and to take their career as a holistic long-term view. So I hope I've provided that for people. So thanks for letting me talk about that.
Well, that's it. It's definitely an honour to have you on. I'm a big admirer of your work, and it was great to just like you said. I think because it's the thing I love about just in general when I'm talking to people is that you could put 6 or 7 people in a room and ask them about their career in art, and not one of them would have the same story. Everybody's had a different experience of how they've got into it, through either being self-taught or bumping into someone at a convention or through a friend or going to school. So yeah, like it's just good to get people on, because I think as one of the things that I find is good for young artists is finding somebody who has a similar story to you, and then kind of clutching onto that and seeing how they carved their path, and then it can also help you find similar avenues into work. So yeah, it's good when you have multiple people on, because then everybody's got that different story about how they broke in the industry. So yeah, it's been good to have you on.
Thanks, agreed. I always listen to podcasts, and I find myself really relating to most of the things that I hear and agreeing with most of the things that I hear, and that it just gives you confidence that you're not some outlier, that you have shared experiences.
Yeah.
So I don't presume to be like the best guy in the world. A long career with a lot of help along the way, and I've managed to fumble myself into doing this work for over 20 years. So young guys, don't take my work. I need it. I'm trying, just like you.
Okay, no problem. Right, great, Mike. Thanks again for coming on. Yeah, guys, just thanks again for listening. Make sure to leave a comment or review on iTunes, and you'll be in a chance with winning a copy of Procreate 4 for iPad. And thanks again to Mike. And yeah, stay tuned, guys, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye-bye.